All right, welcome everybody to our Week 8 lecture presentation. This week we are going to talk about analyzing speech and basically preparing for the Unit 9 essay assignment. So let's continue forward. All right, things to keep in mind for this week. Be sure that you watch Natalie Warren's TED Talk on being young and making an impact. There is a question in the discussion board about that particular presentation. I'm also looking for you to start finding a video to analyze for your essay 3 video critique, because that essay will be due at the end of week 9. Be sure you respond to the week 9 discussion board questions. Those should help you develop your ideas for your essay. And in the course schedule, I had that we were supposed to take quiz 2 this week, and I have neglected to put terms in the assignments and quizzes area to help you study for that quiz. Now, I understand that you all are working hard to read all the required reading in the textbook, so you already have a firm grasp of the material and the terms that are within that reading. However, I thought that it would be only fair to allow you to have access to a list of terms to get ready for that quiz. So what we're going to do is I will be posting terms to study, and that will include terms for quiz 2 and 3, and we're going to combine those and take it after spring break. So that's the plan, and be looking for those terms. So let's real quickly go over what the essay 3 assignment is and what the expectations are. Basically what you're going to be doing is an analysis, and a lot of times what English teachers tend to do, and I have done this in the past as well, is have students write a literary analysis. So this is an analysis of a novel or poems, or, you know, it could be short stories. However, it usually has to do with a literary type of genre. Now, I thought that it would be more applicable to our class overall topic of changing your current culture, and also a little more interesting, a different slant on analysis for you to actually analyze speeches. And so we did a little bit of analysis last week in the discussion board through the different links that I gave you for the TED Talks, and we're also going to analyze another one this week as well. But basically what you're going to do is create a critique of the effectiveness of a particular TED Talk of your choice, and how that talk relates to our class theme of changing our current culture or our world. Now, you should work on finding a video that relates somewhat to either your specific topic for changing your world, or a more generalized topic of how to change the world, like we looked at last week with those videos. In the class syllabus, I have some suggested videos for different talks you could take a look at. Of course, any of the videos that we looked at last week are fair game, and the video for this week is fair game as well. But the point would be that you find a video that is interesting to you, that you found engaging, that relates to changing our current culture, so it goes along with our class theme, and that you would be willing to write a 3 to 5 page essay to analyze that particular speech. So it needs to be something substantial. A lot of the videos that we've watched so far are shorter, 5 to 10 minute speeches. But if you could find something that's a little longer and more substantive, that would probably be helpful in terms of the length of a paper that you're supposed to write for this analysis. Now, one of the elements that we're adding to this particular essay is the use of source material to back up your point of view. So this essay should be able to back up your point of view concerning the work's effectiveness with outside research. So you're going to integrate a total of 3 sources into your paper. That includes the one TED Talk that you choose. And please send me an email so I can approve your choice. And or you can post it in the discussion board if you would like to get approval that way, and just be aware that I could say no, so it's a little less intimidating to send me an email. But keep in mind that you should also be using outside sources. Well, how do we do that? We're going to look at either source material that has to do with the actual topic of the speech, or source material that's going to be about critiquing speeches, so about analysis. So whether that is someone analyzing other speeches, or if it is an expert in some way in analysis, those are the types of sources you're looking for. So either things that have to do with the actual topic that's being presented, or things that have to do with analysis. So your critique needs to be 3 to 5 pages long. That's MLA formatted, so it needs to be double spaced, 1-inch margins. You need to have a title page, which you can of course find the example title page in the announcements. And it needs to have MLA citations, in-text citations, and works cited page citations. I will be posting a description of this assignment in the course, in the assignments and quizzes area of the course. And keep in mind that this also should include Times New Roman font, 12-point font, all that fun stuff. So it is worth 200 points. It is longer than the papers that we've done so far, and it's a little bit more in depth. So those are the elements that we're looking for with the Essay 3 assignment. Now, in our textbook, we have a great chapter on critique and how to go about a critique. So one of the things that it talks about is critical reading. And of course, in a video presentation, you're not reading anything unless you're reading the transcript of the speech. But I think that the skills discussed about reading are applicable in terms of viewing as well. But think about what the author or the speaker says, how well the points are made. So you're analyzing these things as you are watching. Try to think about the assumptions that underlie the argument. So what assumptions are being presented, or what assumptions are already there? So does the speaker assume that you know a certain amount of information? Does the speaker assume that you don't know anything? What kind of facts or knowledge does the speaker assume relevant to the argument that they're making? Is there anything overlooked? Do we see holes in the arguments that are being presented? Or do we see fallacies in the arguments that are presented? So is the speaker sharing the whole picture? And then what implications can be drawn from this analysis? So what overall point of view could you create when analyzing the speech? So that's when you look at reading, and we can apply those ideas to speeches. When we write a critique, I think these are very important to keep in mind. And this is also from our textbook. It says that you need to include a fair and accurate summary of the work. So this should be a non-biased summary. It should not be part of an opinion-based summary. This is really just letting us know what's going on in the speech. And when you create that summary, create it with in mind that your reader may or may not have watched the speech that you watched, and you need to present the information accurately and fairly. And it also needs to clearly summarize the material utilizing lead-in statements like we talked about with our blog post assignment. So in integrating source material, integrating that summary, it needs to use a lead-in statement, using the author or the speaker's name, using the title of the speech, letting us know that the information that you are sharing is a summary of the speech that you watched. And it also needs to include information ideas from other sources if you think that these are pertinent. So not just random quotes. We don't want to see things that are added into your paper just for the sake of filling up space. We actually want to see source material that is pertinent to the ideas and the analysis that you are presenting. And it also will need to include a statement whether or not you agree or disagree with the speaker. And use specific examples from the speech and clear logic to show your agreement or disagreement. And you also need to share your own assumptions, whether that's what did you expect to see in the speech and did the speech live up to those expectations, or the assumptions that you make concerning the audience, concerning the way in which the work is presented, so on and so forth. Now, when we analyze a speech, we can use the different techniques of critical reading and critical writing, but when we analyze a speech, there are going to be elements that are going to be a little different than the written word, and so we need to keep those in mind. So I found a really great source by Dlugan online, and I thought it was a great resource to look at how do we approach an analysis of a speech. So the different points that Dlugan makes include a critique of the speech objective. So what is the point? What is the purpose? The audience and context of the speech, the content and structure of the speech, the delivery skills and techniques used, and your personal reaction. So let's just break these down and look at them and see how we can apply those to looking at a speech. So, of course, first thing we're going to look at is the objective. So, what is the speaker's goal? This could be in the form of a thesis statement. Oftentimes, we don't see the thesis in a speech because obviously they're speaking. But what is the point and purpose of the speech? What is the reason why they are sharing the information they are sharing? Is it to educate? Is it to motivate, to persuade, or to entertain? And that's a little different than what we would look at in a purpose in a literary work in terms of writing an essay or a thesis statement or analyzing an essay or thesis statement. These elements may be part of writing, but it's not always something that we take into consideration. Other things, what is the primary message that's being delivered? So the goal, what is the goal? To educate, to motivate, to persuade, or entertain. What is the primary message? So what are they trying to get across? What is their topic? And what is their point of view concerning the topic? And then look at the why. Why does the person deliver this speech? Is this speech something that the person created themselves or were asked to present on and said, okay, here you go? Is this person the right person for the job? Are they getting the job done? Do their credentials match up with the point and purpose of the speech? And do you think that the objective was achieved? Do you think it was met? And if you think about it in terms of writing, and you're writing your analysis, you could have a section in your paper about the objective. And this idea of was the objective achieved could be your overall theme of that section of your paper. And then you can share the details. So you think that the objective was achieved, and this is how it was achieved through the goal of the speech being clear. This is the goal. This was the primary message delivered. And these were the means that the speaker used to share that primary message. And here are the person's credentials to back up that they are the right person for the job. Other things to look at when you are analyzing a speech would be the audience and context of the speech. Now, of course, in writing, we definitely take into account audience. We've spent the last two papers discussing audience in terms of an informal audience and then a professional audience. And speakers have a completely different kind of audience. It's more reactionary than writing. Of course, as a writer, we don't generally get to see the initial reaction of an audience to what we are presenting. A speaker has a completely different type of experience. They get to know exactly who their audience is because they can see their faces. They know who was asked to come to that particular event that they are presenting their speech to. And so they know the demographics of the audience. They know, is it preliminary Or is it primarily young people? Is it primarily older people? Is this a group of business leaders? Are these students? We know the demographics because we see them, and we know the element of what the speech is there for. So as a speaker, you have a more important connection with the audience, and the audience plays a really great impact on the development of the speech. Yes, the speaker should have notes and should have an idea of the way in which they're going to present material, but the way that the audience reacts often will gear the speech in a certain direction. Whether that's if the audience is reacting to jokes that are being told, and maybe that means that the speaker is going to add those more, add more emphasis, share the jokes, and then analyze it further. So take it longer than they originally intended because of the audience reaction. Or if the audience seems deadpan and not reactionary at all, how does the speaker react? Maybe they become more animated, more enthusiastic. Maybe they start giving other examples or personal experience, some way to make that connection that they see directly with the audience. So think about where and when the speech is delivered, what kind of conference or what kind of connection does the speaker have with that particular place of venue, and the demographics of the audience. The size of the audience can have a big impact. The intimacy of a room is very much a part of a speech. If you have just a few people that you are talking to, maybe a room of 20 people, then you can, make eye contact with every single individual in the room. You can connect to them on a more personal level. You can draw them into your speech. You can ask them questions and they answer you. So you can definitely create a more personal connection with a smaller audience, as opposed to a very large audience, and where you can't make eye contact with every single person in the room. But you have to be larger than in your stage presence than you would in a small, intimate type of venue. So how large is the audience? And then think about the difference between the live audience that is there in studio with the speaker of the TED Talk that you're choosing, but then think about the external target audience. A lot of the speeches on TED Talks are actually at conferences that the website TED Talks puts on. So the large TED Talk conferences, and so the intended audience is specifically you, the internet audience, and so that could have a big impact on the way that something is being presented. Oftentimes it's really connected to the visuals that are added. In a live audience situation, a speaker will be seen the entire time by the audience, and there might be a projector behind them where the audience can see different images and they can work in terms of the visual element. But for a video production that you're posting online, that those images often take the place of the speaker, and you'll see the speaker talking, and then an image will come up and that will take up your whole screen, and so you lose that visual element of the speaker, and so the speaker has to then apply him or herself even more so to come across audibly with that image, much like what we're doing right now. Other things. So the content and structure of the speech is going to be important. So I want you to keep in mind that there are several elements of the speech that we can analyze. And the actual topic of your speech that you are analyzing does not necessarily have to be the only thing you are analyzing. So yes, we want to dive into the topic, and we want to tell if we agree or disagree with the topic, and we want to connect to that topic in some way. But when you are analyzing a work of literature, you go beyond the plot, right? So if you were analyzing a novel, you wouldn't just summarize the plot and then move on. That would be called a book report, right? So if we're analyzing a story or we're analyzing a novel, we also look at things like metaphor and alliteration, and we look at the use of flashback, and we look at those more technical elements of a work that creates an overall impression, tone, symbolism, all that kind of stuff, which is not just commenting on the plot structure of the story. And in the same way, when we're analyzing a speech, we don't just focus on the content of the speech. We have to look at all those exterior elements in terms of audience and purpose. We can look at body language and visuals and all that kind of stuff. So the content of the speech is not necessarily going to be the only thing you focus on, but it is important. So I don't want to leave that out when talking about analyzing a speech, but just keep in mind, analysis is more than plot summary. And looking at the content of the speech is like plot summary. So keep that in mind. So some of the things when you look at content and structure of a speech have to do with before the speech. Now, as a video presentation, we don't often get to see this element. So this could be, how is the speaker introduced? Are there credentials shared? What is the format? All that kind of stuff that has to do with more opening elements that we don't always get to see in the video presentation. So if there are before the speech items, like someone that's introducing the speaker, and the overall impression, maybe that's the circumstance in which the speaker is being presented. Maybe it's the program that the audience is handed out, which things we don't have access to. So just keep that in mind in analyzing a speech as a whole. Before the speech can also be part of the analysis, though we don't necessarily have access to that in this format. So looking at content of what we do have access to, one of them is going to be the opening. So this is like analyzing an introductory paragraph, right? So this is where the hook happens. So how does the speaker hook the audience? How do they draw them into the speech? Or do they even try? Sometimes it's, hi, my name is this, and this is my topic. And that's not very hook-worthy, right? But how effective is that element of drawing the audience in? Does the speech open with a story, a joke, a startling statistic, controversial statement, powerful visual? Whatever it is, how does the speaker utilize that introduction element to get the audience interested in what they're sharing? And that can also set the tone for the entire speech. So if you start a speech with a joke, you're automatically telling your audience that, hey, I'm trying to be funny, and this is going to be lighthearted. And then how does that connect to the rest of the content? Do they actually set the stage for the rest of the speech, or does it seem off-putting in terms of it doesn't connect with the rest of the speech? Did the speech opening clearly establish the intent of the presentation? Was it memorable? And then think about, as we move into the body of the speech, does it connect with the rest of what's happening? So looking at content and structure, the next section, of course, is going to be the body of the speech. So you can think about, was the presentation focused? Did it flow well? Did it have all the arguments necessary? Did it share stories and anecdotes? Did it actually achieve the primary objective? Were examples given? Did they give statistics to improve understanding? What other things did they do to improve understanding, whether that's statistics, sharing other source material, examples from real life, sharing their own specific stories? Were there metaphors used? Were they comparing, this thing to this thing so that you can have a better understanding? Was there symbolism involved? How was the speech organized? Was it logically organized? Did it flow from one idea to the next easily so you can follow along? And did they use smooth transitions between one idea to the next so that everything flowed well together? So those are things to keep in mind. So what is in the body of the speech, and then how is it presented? And does it present it in a way that is understanding to you and easy to follow? And then the last part, of course, for the structure of a speech is going to be the conclusion. And think about, is it concise? Is it memorable? Does it bring everything together? And was there a call to action? And you may not have a call to action with every speech that you watch, depending on the purpose. Remember, if it's a speech to entertain you, you may not be called to do something after the speech. But if it's a speech to persuade, then yeah, you should have a call to action at the end. It's persuading you to do something. But depending on the purpose will also depend on the way the conclusion wraps up. Other things to keep in mind with speech and analysis is to look at the delivery skills and technique. In terms of literature, if we were to look at delivery skills and technique, this would be about word choice, metaphors, similes, sensory details, those kinds of things. But in the terms of a speech, this is actually the way that the speaker presents information. And this can happen with their enthusiasm and connection to the audience. So were they enthusiastic? Did they interact with the audience? And if they did, was it effective? Was the message you focused and we focused rather than I focused? And how does that affect the interpretation of your interpretation of the speech altogether? We talked about that we focused and you focused idea with professional writing, and you could see that it could actually apply to speech giving as well. Because, why would I go listen to someone speak if not to help me out with something? Usually it has something to do with motivation or, whether it's motivation to do something in my life, or maybe it is a speech is given to teach me something. But the purpose relates to the audience directly. And so having that you focused or we focused can be more effective than an I focused type of speech, although you will see those as well. A lot of times informational type of speeches are going to have I focused content, so keep that in mind. Other delivery skills and techniques could include humor, which we talked about a little bit ago, but was humor used? Was it safe and appropriate given the audience? So did it apply to the audience, or try to approach the audience in a way that is not offensive? I think that if you guys watched the Oscars, we had the big controversy, right, of it not being diverse enough. And we had Chris Rock as the host of the Oscars this year, and he made it very much part of his hosting, that element of diversity, and he was able to mix in humor with more serious tones of what the expectation should be. So he did approach it in a very effective way. And, if you have a chance to take a look at some of his hosting for the Oscars this year, you can see how that connection is made, especially in his introductory kind of speech. So whether or not it was safe for that instance, it would be up to your interpretation. But were pauses used? So think about the delivery. So, delivery has to do with the way that the speech is presented by the speaker. So delivery would be, the way they talk, the way they have body language, the connection to the audience, and all that kind of stuff. So this could even have to do with the canter of their voice. So did they pause effectively with punchlines and phrasing? So how does that connect to humor? There's definitely a timing element with humor, and you would see that with stand-up comics. Stand-up comics that are really good have that understanding of when to pause and when to make that connection with the inflection in their voice. And then think about relevancy. So sometimes you'll see speeches that will start with a joke and it has nothing to do with anything. It's just there to be an icebreaker. But these are not as effective, I would say, because it's not relevant to what you are presenting. It's more, I just want to make everyone feel comfortable. So look at the relevancy of the humor to the purpose of the speech and the topic. Other delivery skills and techniques that speakers use would be visual aids, and you'll see those a lot in the TED Talks. So people most likely have a PowerPoint presentation behind them, and then, like I mentioned before, you'd probably get an up-close visual of that. So how are visual aids utilized? Were they designed effectively? Did they complement the speech arguments? I did watch a TED Talk where the speaker was presenting a way to fix roads more effectively than they're being fixed now. So we just layer asphalt upon asphalt upon asphalt. And what he was saying is that, oftentimes they crumble and rocks, can hit windshields and that kind of stuff. So he had invented a way to fix the roads that would be more effective and last longer and stronger, and actually take less time to fix. And so throughout the presentation, he actually did an experiment with the materials that he was claiming would work well with the structure. So he had a microwave, and he had he had a bunch of rocks, and he had all the stuff to make the new improved asphalt right there on the stage. So visual aids don't necessarily have to be PowerPoint presentations. They could actually be tangible items that the speaker uses to exemplify an idea. And look at the timing of the visual aids. Did they add energy to the presentation? This particular one, the speaker was really dry, and so the visual made it much easier to pay attention to what he was saying, because you were like, what in the world is he doing with all that stuff? So whether or not he was extremely interesting to listen to, the things he was doing on the stage was actually very effective. And were the visual aids easy to understand? Were they accessible to the audience in some way? And do you think that any other visuals would help the presentation? Another element that's very similar to this would be the use of stage area. And this, whether it's the speaker walking around the stage or using their hands or setting up props and things like that. So the use of the stage area, do you think that they looked like this little minuscule person on a really huge stage that didn't move, and that was distracting? Or maybe it's, they stood behind a podium the entire time. So what the use of the stage area can determine the effectiveness of the speech itself as well. Anything that distracts you from the content of their speech, something that in a way that is not related to the speech content, is probably not a positive for that speech. Other things in terms of delivery, we talked about that a little bit in stage usage, but physical gestures. Did the speaker have adequate posture? Were the gestures natural and complementary of the topic of the speech? And the timing, were they easy to see? A lot of times people tend to talk with their hands, but they do it really close to the body. And in a very large room with a large audience, your movements may need to be larger to make more of an impact. Now, as a video presentation, large, over-the-top body movements may be overwhelming because we actually see the speaker up close and personal. But if I were, in a room of 500 people and I was sitting at the back, little tiny gestures used in front of the body, close to the body, may not even be able to be seen or distinguished. So the speaker has to have an ability to work within the audience as well, and the space. Other parts of that would also include eye contact. And like I mentioned with the difference between audience, eye contact can be very important depending on the size of the audience. If it's a very small room with a small amount of people, you can make eye contact with everyone and really get them involved. And eye contact is a way for a speaker to really connect with an audience. We see this in political speeches all the time, especially ones that are, don't have a physical audience in the building. The politicians will look directly at a camera and make eye contact with you as the viewer. And that can be very effective or kind of intimidating depending on the way that it's presented. So eye contact can really make that connection with an audience. Vocal variety is also a part of technique in speaking. So is the person easy to hear? This has to do with even the use of microphones, and is the equipment working well? That can actually detract from the speaker, even though the speaker has nothing to do with it. But think about tone and inflection. Were they loud and soft? Was there a variety? of tone and inflection that was appropriate, or were they really monotone, like the Asphalt guy that I was talking about? His voice did not have a lot of inflection, so if he didn't have those visuals, it would have been a dud for me as far as the speech goes. But was the speaker easy to hear? Were their tone variations appropriate? Was the pace appropriate? Now, this is something I get into all the time. I talk too fast. But and I understand that if you talk too fast, your audience may not be able to understand you. So I try to pace myself. But was the pace varied? Was it slow enough overall to be understandable? Oftentimes you can also see how the pace is connected to the points that are being made. So if something is very important that the speaker wants to get across to the audience, oftentimes they will slow down, make inflections very clear, and that will grab the audience's attention and make them realize this is an important point. Also, things like repetition, which we'll talk about in a different slide, can also add that emphasis. But in terms of vocal variety, looking at the pace, slow enough to understand, varied pace so it's interesting, but also pauses. Pauses are used to aid in understanding, to heighten excitement, to provide drama, to give that punchline and the humor. So the use of pause, which is something we don't see so much in writing except for maybe poetry, but the use of pause can be very effective as well. And then finally, language. What is the language used in the speaker's speech? One of you guys last week in the discussion board talked about the use of slang and how that was part of a speech. And a lot of times we would say, oh my gosh, slang is bad. Why would they use slang in a professional setting? But slang in a speech can have a different impact than slang would have in a professional letter or would have in an academic type of paper. So what kind of language is used? Is it appropriate for the audience and the situation? Were they articulate in their speaking so you could understand every word that is being said? Think about sentence structure in terms of were the sentences short? Were they easy to follow along? Sometimes if a speaker uses very long sentence structure, it feels like they're reading from a script rather than being authentic with you. Was technical jargon used? Was it unnecessary or necessary? Was it complex or easy to understand? Did they define terms for you if they are going to use technical jargon? So that could be an element of language that would be important. And then just look at rhetorical devices. So like I mentioned a little bit ago, repetition. Oftentimes, if a speaker is repeating things, it's something that they want you to remember. So repetition means remember. Things like alliteration can add emphasis to what is being spoken. And, just think about other kind of rhetorical devices, literary devices, if you will, to create that language element. And finally, when we look at analysis of speeches, it does come down to your reaction. So a speaker, like I mentioned before, has such an intrinsic connection to the audience that is so, spot on. It's in the moment. So the reaction of the audience is very important when you're looking at analyzing a speech. So how did the speech make you feel? Were you convinced of whatever their topic may be? Would you want to listen to the speaker again? And did they provide any original ideas or techniques, things that caught your attention that made you want to keep on watching? So the reactionary element to a speech is very important when analyzing a speech. So with that, things to remember for this week. Make sure you watch Natalie Warren's speech, Being Young and Making an Impact. Be sure to respond to the Unit 9 discussion board questions, which have to do with that particular speech, and then your plans for the next essay. Keep in mind that Essay 3 video critique is due by the end of week 9, and I will be adding the essay description very soon. We won't be taking a quiz until after spring break, which will be a combined quiz of 2 and 3. And remember, when you're writing your paper for an analysis of a speech, Not all these questions that we've talked about with this presentation need to be a part of your analysis. So you're going to choose what is important to you in making that connection. But keep in mind the overall purpose of the analysis, which is to see if they are effective in their presentation and how it connects to our idea of changing the world as our class topic, and look at the method of approach to a speech and how that is important. Okay, so that's all I have for this week. If you do have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me via email. Of course, send me your ideas for which speech you would like to analyze. And other than that, we will see you in the discussion board. So have a great week. Bye.